What's good, YouTube? This is my top 32 Fire King Jurak deck profile. This is my very first regional top that I've ever had. Very excited to show off the deck and talk a little bit about how the deck performed, some of the changes I would make in the future, and just how I ended up playing the deck and the overall regionals experience. This is a top 32 of the November Kissimmee, Florida regionals. So starting off with the main engine of the deck, we have 3 legendary Fire King Ponics. I finally picked up the Starlight Rares for the deck. They look beautiful. I love them. I'm going to use them from now on for sure. And then we're on 3 copies of Fire King Cortiero Volcanics, 3 copies of Fire King High Avatar Kirin, 3 copies of Sacred Fire King Garunix. So we play 3 of each of them just to maximize consistency. The Garunix, although technically a brick, will pair with any of the other fire cards that end up getting destroyed. And so we'll always play 3 of him, in my opinion. Next up on the Jurak cards, we are on 3 Jurak Megalo. It is one of the best 2-card combo cards that you can have access to, just because if you're able to destroy it, you're always setting up the board wipe for your opponent. It also assists in chain blocking. So if you want to make sure your Garunix doesn't get hit with an impulse, you'll use Garunix Chainlink 1 and then Megalo Chainlink 2. That's always a really nice play. Or if since Megalo can end up being Ash Blossomed, sometimes you'll do it the other way around, just depending on what you're trying to play around. So, love him. And then getting to the one-ofs, we are on 1 Arvada, Monster Negate. I don't think that requires any explanation there. 1 Fire King Avatar Kirin. The reason that we're on 1 Old Kirin is because depending on the 1-card combo that we're playing with Ponix, we might either go for one specific board that I'll show, or if we want to play a little bit lower to the ground, Kirin is what bridges us into our dinosaur engine to set up the Megalo as well. Then we're on 1 copy of Fire King High Avatar Garunix. So once again, just depending on the combos that we're going for, we'll want to end up playing one of the old Garunix. There was 1 round where someone Fenrir banished him, and I will say I lost that game not having access to this card. I think you absolutely need to play it. And that is the main engine in terms of monsters. And then we are on 3 copies of Sanctuary. We are on 2 copies of Fire King Island. Sometimes you will end up board wiping, and so you don't always have the fire to protect the island off of the Sanctuary when you go to board wipe, and so you'll just want to hold on to a you'll just want a second copy. And a lot of times people will destroy or banish your 1 Fire King Island and think you're not on another. So when you search Sanctuary and then activate it, they may not interrupt it, allowing you to place another island. Very nice card. Only 2 copies of Skyburn. A third never really came up, and I was constantly using it, and the games weren't lasting long enough to use the protection effect. And then for consistency, we are on 3 copies of Fossil Dig. Fossil Dig was 100% an MVP this entire tournament. Whenever I saw it in Aponix, I would always lead Fossil Dig, just because it let me set up the board wipe through Droll, which happened several times. And so Fossil Dig, I think, is a need. Dinkabui's list was on Animador and Archosaur. I am not, primarily because I think the deck has enough normal summons. And if I'm ever having to normal summon Animador and Archosaur to activate its effect, I am most likely losing that game just due to every single hand trap that exists in the game. And it only ever really combos well if I already have a Megalo. So it's inconsistent at that even too. And then to continue on, I'm also on 1 Prosperity. Prosperity lost me one of my games, just because just banishing the extra deck, I ended up losing a lot of resources that I needed in a grind game. Overall, I do think the deck is mostly consistent enough, and I'm not really playing any floodgates or anything that I'd want to end up searching off of Prosperity, so I'm not 100% certain on keeping it in, but it was okay for me. And then one called by, it negates Fool Loss, it negates Ash Blossom, it negates Ghost Bell, so we're always playing a called by. And then we're on 3 copies of Dominus Impulse as far as non-engine. Shout out to Anthony for lending me the Dominus Impulses. They definitely won me several of my matches being able to activate and resolve that effect. There was a lot of branded Draco Tail, and so being able to negate branded fusions, very nice. Continuing on for our non-engine, we're on 3 copies of Molcharmy Fualas. The best Charmy to be playing. I'm also on Almirage, so worst case I can normal summon it, link it away for an Almirage, pop it with an island, and then continue playing. Yep. And then probably the MVP as far as the non-engine ended up going for this tournament were my 3 Bestials. Baldrake was, of course, the weakest of them, since I'm primarily on fire monsters. I wasn't really ending on a light or a dark, but I also barely ever drew Baldrake, so I was primarily using it as a DD Crow. Druisworm and Magnemite definitely came up. I went up against a Yummy player, and I drew Magnemite every single game against them. Felt very good. It also, when I'm going second and they see non-engine like Impulse, Fua, and Bestials, it might make people believe that I am on Malice. And if I end up conceding early, it didn't end up happening where I did end up conceding early in any of my rounds. But it at least gave the impression to my opponent that I might be on Malice instead. They also provide an additional monster for Link plays. Fun fact, I've been playing Genesis for the last month, and I had to Link summon again, and that was a very fun experience, going back to Link summoning. But that is the main deck, 40 cards. Moving to the extra deck, we do have a Bidoof. He is my field center. I did get deck checked. I did not lose deck check thanks to this Bidoof. I probably would have lost my mind had I lost a deck check because of him. The goat token. The sheep token. Who is the goat? And then we're on 2 copies of Jurak Astero, 2 copies of Jurak Meteor. The reason I'm on 4 is primarily because if I end up going to Prosperity, I feel comfortable just going down to 1 board wipe, and I can always remove the extra board wipe from the deck. That did lose me the round, though, is not having my second board wipe. However, most of my rounds, I never even got to resolve it. It was just a threat that it could happen. That ended up winning me a lot of those games. We're on 1 Hyang of the Eternity. One of the best interruptions that we can have against our opponent is just the board or the monster wipe. It triggers the other Grunics. It is also spell trap removal, which came up. I was going up against a branded Draco Tail player, summoned it in defense, wiped their board, used the ignition effect to then pop a back row. Very nice card. We're on 1 Typhon. Typhon never came up. It is a dark monster, which is one of the main reasons I never really wanted to summon him. If Typhon was fire, this would be a much different story. But having things like Princess Engraven and the like, it just made it not as good. I was expecting maybe 1 or 2 more Ryziel decks than ended up actually happening, but I wanted to have a solid answer to Detonator. I'm obviously already on Druisworm, but just having another answer would have been nice, which is why I'm on it. I'm on 1 Anima, 1 Almirage. Anima should be Linkuriboh. I forgot Linkuriboh was legal now. Almirage is for the play that I've already mentioned as far as the normal summoning Fua Loss. I wanted to have a solution for that, and also I'm on some other hand traps in the side, so just having a monster I can convert to fire is the reason I'm on Almirage. I'm on one Sunlight Wolf. This is part of the reason this should be a Link Karibo, as it also threatens a Decode Talker Heat Soul. I don't think anybody would think I might be going towards a Heat Soul line, but that's another reason to consider cutting the Prosperity, is going Heat Soul to draw 2. Obviously, once on your turn, once on your opponent's turn. I'm on one Hita and one Dark. The main difference between my list and Dinkabui's list is he was on Super Poly targets and siding Dark. I felt like Super Poly was going to be good, but I felt like Mitsurugi was going to be better. And so having a way to steal my opponent's Murakumo just felt like a really solid option, which is why I wanted to main deck the Dark, which is also why Anima's here, but once again, that could have been Link Karibo. Also, I will say Link Karibo never would have came up because Ponix, normal summoning Ponix never had an opportunity to like dodge an Imperm, but just in the future, I would make that swap. Finally, we're on one SP Little Knight. Once again, the Hita, the Dark combination to set up a Little Knight is very nice. I'm on one Promethean Princess. She is typically an end board piece, at least as far as being in the grave. Very beautiful card. I ended up losing round 9 because I did not have access to Princess since my opponent kept Black Goat laughing, calling Promethean Princess, which was very fun for my opponent. Finally, I'm on Zealantis and Raging Phoenix for OTK lines. The main reasoning is Lunalight. I wanted to have a couple different options as far as outing Lunalight, whatever the towers is. I'm on Doggeran in the side, which we'll go over. Hita can search it, but also having Raging Phoenix access so where I could punch over it would have been great. But overall, very happy with the extra deck. Not many changes I would end up making there. The side deck was kind of a last minute, I wouldn't say last minute put together, but I wish I did get more testing specifically with siding in for specific matches. I was expecting a lot of Branded Dracotail, a lot of Mitsurugi, a lot of Yummy. I guess I kind of underestimated how much Rogue there would be, as well as not seeing any Lunalight or Ryziel decks. However, we can just go into the side. So I'm on 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird. This is specifically in here for Mitsurugi. It came in every single time against Mitsurugi. We're on 3 copies of Ghost Spell. Counter Yummy, counters Mitsurugi. Notice these are both Wind and Earth, which directly conflict with Dominus Impulse. The reason I'm still on these is because these are good. And I will just try to use them before I activate Impulse. We're on 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. I was expecting Branded, so I wanted to have an answer towards Branded Fusion, and this was one of the best ones that I had. And then for going first, also to take out the Fuas for, I would put in 1 Talons. I never ended up putting in the Overraptor. It was primarily to go with the Doggeran for when I go second, just having more access to try to out something like a Towers monster. So ultimately, these could have come out. But going first, I would take out the Fuas for typically Talents plus plus at least 2 of these for whatever was good in the matchup. And then finally, the card that never came in was Dark Ruler No More. This is the primary card I would cut from this side deck. The main thinking was it cuts off Mitsurugi prayers. That was the entire thought, where they couldn't take 8 and then summon back. Or if there was just some degenerate end board that ended on a bunch of negates, I could go for Dark Ruler No More. It never came up. Nor do I think it was really even a good choice for Mitsurugi, as when I got paired against them, I was taking out green cards to put in hand traps. So, especially as all of these hand traps are good against that matchup specifically. And so then, just to briefly talk about my tournament experience, it was great. It was a very competitive regionals, I would say. We had the North American Nationals champion, Wilfredo Flores, there. We had 6-time YCS champion, Kamal Crooks there, who was actually my round 6 opponent, and did not realize I was on Bestials, which won me one of my games against him. And then double Fua into top decking Ponix won me my match against him. And then it was just a very competitive regional. There was a lot of Branded Draco Tail players, a lot of very good Branded Draco Tail players. That ended up being my round 8 loss. And then my round 9 loss was to White Forest. I did not really have a good counter to White Forest outside of, some of these hand traps, but they ended up making a light and dark, or they ended up making a Chaos Angel that made all of their monsters unaffected by my monster effects, so my board wipe was completely useless. He knew how to call Black Goat Laughs to stop my strategy. Just very unfortunate. However, getting into the main combo that I would like to do, that I've been outside of the game as far as advanced for, like I said, about a month now, and I literally came up with this. I mean, people probably already know it as far as other Fire King players, but I literally came up with this in round 1 up against a Mitsurugi player when I was going first. So I normal summon Ponix effect. I added, those are all monsters. I added Sanctuary, place Island effect, pop the Ponix, add Grunix effect to summon. And then typically the line that I was going for to play through the most amount of hand traps and still just leave myself on plenty of interruption is I would pop Kieran. Kieran would send Misk, and then Misk I would banish to then summon Megalo, move towards the end of the turn, pop the Megalo, and then and then activate Megalo, of course, to send Astero, and I'd set up the board wipe for my opponent's turn while adding the Ponix back to my hand. This very good for me normally in testing, because when I went to board wipe, I would let my entire field die. That would trigger my island, and then I would chain link 2 Ponix to summon itself. And then the island would pop the Ponix, allowing me to trigger Grunix effect, send Kieran, special back the Ponix, and then I would have set up for my opponent's turn. And also still just be protecting myself. This would be the main combo I would go for. Especially if I had Ponix and then Megalo. Megalo could be any fire monster, but Megalo was the best for me in terms of chain blocking and then also setting up the board wipe. So normal summon Ponix. Ponix would add Sanctuary. I'd activate Sanctuary, placing Fire King Island. And then Island effect, I would pop the Megalo, add Grunix to my hand. And then if I wanted, I no longer need to play around Ash Blossom because my opponent would Ash the island. So at this point, I do kind of want to try and play around Impulse. So I would activate Grunix Chainlink 1, Megalo Chainlink 2. Megalo would end up sending the Astero. Grunix would summon itself, activate Grunix, popping the Volcanix. And then Volcanix would trigger, allowing me to summon the old Grunix from my deck. And then from here, I would link these 2 off for Sunlight Wolf. And then I would link off the Ponix for Anima. And this is where I was saying that, like, if these 2 obviously were Cybers, I could go Heat Soul lines to end up drawing. But primarily, I would go here, trigger the Sunlight Wolf, add back the Ponix, and then link those 2 off for Princess. Activate Princess's effect. Special back the Volcanix. And then Volcanix could trigger, popping the Ponix that I just added back. Add Kieran to my hand. And then I would make her level 8. And then link off those 2 for Hida. And so 1.5 cards, specifically because it was Megalo, I have the board wipe. But in this end board, I pass it back to my opponent. The mandatory effect of Ponix activates in their standby phase to add him back. And so now if they out my Hida, I'm triggering Grunix. I have the board wipe available to me at any time. If they special summon, I can Princess pop my Hida, pop their card. Typically what I would try to do, just in terms of sequencing, is I would Kieran effect, pop the Ponix, special summon itself, and then I would activate the Grunix effect to summon itself, popping another Kieran from deck, and then typically I'll summon the Ponix to give myself a search. It depends. And then go for the rank 8 access in Sanctuary, and then try to use something like Princess to pop the Eternity, pop their field, and then summon back, and then I would just... I would overwhelm my opponent with advantage at that point. Overall, I'm very pleased with this deck. I think the deck does a lot of different skill checks that not a lot of people are ready for, or at least expecting in a against the normal meta decks. So, for example, summoning a Durandal in attack position gave me the opportunity. I had Kieran Engrave, Arvada on field, and so I attacked into an artifact Durandal. It popped my Arvada, summoned back the Kieran. Kieran crashed into the Durandal, summoned back the Arvada, popped their back row, attack for 18. And then because I had another fire, I had a monster negate, a fire in my hand. That ended up winning me a match. So you're testing people on those kinds of things. I think overall that that way of playing where you last a long time and you are giving yourself more opportunities to skill check your opponent and end up beating them because of it. Either because, they're attacking into your monster during the damage step, so then you get all of your triggers, and if they don't have something that negates activation, you are winning that game. If they just don't know their damage step rulings, it just makes the deck so much more fun. And you can also not necessarily bluff, but you can leave your opponent guessing in some ways. So, for example, normal summon Ash Blossom. Your opponent does not know if you're trying to make a Typhon. They don't know necessarily if you're trying to go battle phase to attack into their monster and trigger your Grunix in hand, or maybe even just a Ponix in hand. Because if you do that, then you're summoning the Ponix in damage step. They can no longer Ash or Imperm your Ponix. I think just that way of playing really set me up for success this tournament, and I contributed primarily to my wins. We also make the joke that it kills brain cells at my locals. People just forget how to play. They just see the chicken and they forget. Overall, had a great time and would highly recommend this deck to anybody who likes, mid-range strategies, who likes some combo elements that aren't too complicated. I love the deck.